The ocean always carried a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat to Emma. She sat at the edge of the Santa Monica Pier, her wheelchair locked into place, and the cool breeze brushing across her face. It was one of those California evenings where the sky transformed into watercolor, splashes of orange, pink, and violet colliding at the horizon. Families strolled past, tourists snapped selfies, and children tugged at their parents for one last ride on the Ferris wheel before nightfall. For Emma, the pier was more than a tourist spot. It was freedom. It was where she could sit without feeling like a burden, where the crashing waves drowned out the whispers and the stares she got too often. She was 16, bright-eyed with a head full of dreams, but ever since the car accident 3 years ago had left her paralyzed from the waist down, the world treated her like she was broken glass, fragile, inconvenient, dangerous to touch. Her mom was working the late shift at a diner nearby, so Emma had insisted she'd be fine spending a couple of hours at the pier before heading home. She was old enough to take care of herself, she'd argued, and besides, she loved the sea. The deal was simply stay in crowded areas, keep her phone charged, and text every 30 minutes. The phone buzzed in her lap. Another message from her mom. "You okay, baby?" Emma smiled softly as she typed back, "Yeah, Mom. Watching the sunset, beautiful as always." She tucked the phone away and turned her gaze back to the horizon. That was when she heard the laughter. Not the innocent kind that bubbles out of children or the cheerful sound of friends sharing a joke, but the sharp, jagged laughter of cruelty. It started behind her, then moved closer. She stiffened, fingers tightening around the rubber grips of her wheels. Well, look what we got here." A voice sneered. "A princess on wheels." Emma's stomach dropped. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. She'd seen them around school, 2 boys seniors with a reputation for picking on anyone weaker. Tyler and Brent. Big, loud, and mean just for the sake of being mean. She stayed quiet, staring at the ocean, hoping they'd get bored. "Hey, didn't you hear me?" Tyler's voice was closer now, dripping with mockery. "What, too good to talk to us? Or are you just slow everywhere?" Brent snickered. "Come on, Ty. Don't be mean. Maybe she just needs a little push." Emma's breath hitched. Her hands locked harder on her wheels, but before she could react, Brent kicked the side of her chair. Not hard enough to topple it, but enough to jolt her body and rattle her bones. The sound echoed louder in her mind than it did in reality. People glanced their way, then quickly looked away, pretending not to see. That hurt worse than the kick. "Move, Cripple," Tyler barked, his foot slamming into the front wheel. "You're blocking the path." Emma's throat tightened, but she forced herself to look at them. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "Leave me alone." The boys roared with laughter. Tyler leaned down, his face inches from hers, his breath sour with soda and cheap cologne. "What are you gonna do if we don't?" Emma's heart raced. She wanted to scream, to cry, to vanish. But all she could do was grip her chair and hope anyone would step in. And that's when she heard it, the low, thunderous growl of engines. At first, it blended with the distant carnival rides and ocean waves, but soon it grew louder, closer, like a storm rolling in. Heads turned. Tourists pulled out their phones. The laughter of the bullies faltered. From the far end of the pier they came. A line of motorcycles, chrome gleaming under the setting sun, leather jackets catching the golden light. One by one they rolled down the wooden planks, engines rumbling deep in their chests like beasts of iron and fire. The ground seemed to vibrate with their arrival. The boys straightened, uneasy now, their false bravado flickering like a candle in the wind. Tyler muttered something under his breath. Brent's smirk had vanished. The bikers weren't just passing through. They were heading straight toward them. Emma's breath caught in her chest. She didn't know who they were or why they were here, but in that moment, with the roar of engines surrounding her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. The pier grew quiet in a way Emma had never heard before. The carnival music in the background still played, the waves still crashed against the pilings below, and vendors still called out for people to buy funnel cakes and churros. But around her, everything seemed to freeze. The line of motorcycles rolled closer, their headlights glowing like a procession of torches. Some of the riders wore heavy leather jackets patched with colors Emma didn't recognize, while others had sleeveless vests, arms tattooed with symbols, names, and stories inked in black and red. Helmets came off one by one, revealing men and women of all ages, beards flecked with gray, braids decorated with beads, ponytails tied back with bandanas. They weren't the kind of people polite society usually smiled at. They looked rough-hardened, like they had seen too much of life on the road. But Emma didn't feel fear. She felt something else entirely, a strange, unexplainable trust. The bikers formed a half-circle around the scene, their engines idling, growls echoing off the wooden beams of the pier. Tourists stepped back, holding up their phones to record. Children clutched their parents' hands. Tyler and Brent exchanged nervous glances. Their smirks had evaporated. One of the bikers swung a heavy boot off his Harley and stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with long black hair streaked with silver. A scar traced from his left eyebrow down to his cheek, but his eyes, sharp, blue, unflinching, never left the boys. His vest bore the words Steel Serpents MC stitched across the back. "You think you're tough? His voice was low, steady, dangerous in its calmness, kicking around a girl who can't fight back. Tyler swallowed hard. We were just joking. The man's voice cut through him like a blade. That didn't sound like a joke. Behind him, another biker revved his engine, the sound making Brent flinch. A woman rider with braided hair pulled off her gloves and crossed her arms, her glare sharper than the men's. You boys think the world owes you something, picking on her because you got nothing else going for you. Emma's hands trembled on her lap, not from fear, but from something else, relief, maybe. For once, someone wasn't looking away. Tyler tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Look, we don't want any trouble. Too late. Another biker growled. The leader, Emma would later learn his road name was Raven, stepped closer until he towered over the boys. The air around him felt heavy charged. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't apologize to her. The command was so firm, so absolute, that for a moment Tyler didn't even react. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Brent shifted uncomfortably. Raven leaned down, his face inches from Tyler's. Now, Tyler turned toward Emma, cheeks burning red, fists clenched at his sides. His voice was barely above a whisper. Sorry. Raven's eyebrow arched, louder. Tyler swallowed. I said I'm sorry. Brent rushed to follow. Yeah, me too, sorry. The apology rang hollow, but it didn't matter. Something inside Emma swelled at that moment. For years she had carried the weight of people's pity, their dismissive glances, their cruel words. But now, for once, it was the bullies who looked small. Get out of here, Raven ordered. The boys didn't hesitate. They turned and bolted down the pier, shoving through the crowd that had gathered. The moment they were gone, the circle of bikers shifted, engines cutting off one by one until the only sound left was the ocean and Emma's uneven breathing. Raven crouched down in front of her, his eyes softening. Up close, he looked older than she first thought, maybe late 40s with lines etched deep into his face. You okay, kid? Emma nodded shakily.
Why, yeah, thank you.
Raven gave a small nod as though he wasn't sure what else to say. He glanced back at his crew, then back at her. Nobody messes with you while we're around, you understand. Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. Strangers, people like this, no less, had just stood up for her in a way even her own classmates never had. Her throat tightened. One of the bikers, the woman with the braids, knelt beside her. Sweetheart, don't let them get to you. People like that, they're cowards. Takes more strength to sit in that chair every day than they'll ever have in their whole lives. Emma's eyes stung. She bit her lip, trying not to cry in front of them, but the kindness in the woman's tone almost undid her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. The pier was still buzzing from what had just happened. People whispered, phones still recording even as the crowd began to thin. Some gave Emma sympathetic smiles as they passed, others simply nodded toward the bikers as though acknowledging an unspoken code of respect. Emma sat in her chair, still reeling. Her heart hadn't slowed down since the moment Tyler kicked her wheel, and now it seemed to beat in rhythm with the faint growl of motorcycles idling. She wasn't sure what to say. She had always been on the receiving end of pity, of looks that slid past her as though she were furniture in the way. But this was different. Raven stayed crouched in front of her, his hand braced casually on one knee. He studied her not with pity, not with judgment, but with something she couldn't place. Concern maybe, respect. You got someone to call? He asked finally, his voice rough but steady. My mom's working? Emma replied, her voice barely above the sound of the waves. She's at a diner a few blocks away. I was supposed to wait here until her shift ends. Raven nodded. And instead, you got stuck with punks who don't know how to act. He let out a low breath through his nose, then stood and glanced back at his crew. We'll make sure you get there safe. Emma blinked. Safe? You mean, we don't leave people behind? Raven said simply. The braided hair woman from earlier stepped forward, her smile faint but warm. Name's Maya. Don't worry, honey. We're not the monsters people think we are. She winked. Though it helps when punks think so. The other bikers chuckled, some clapping Emma lightly on the shoulder as they passed. One of them, a burly man with a beard longer than Emma's forearm, adjusted his vest and muttered, Damn kids got no respect anymore. Emma looked from one face to another, still unsure what was happening. She had seen biker crews before, mostly in movies or passing by on highways. They were always painted as outlaws, dangerous, untouchable. Yet here they were, standing around her like a shield. Raven turned back to her. What's your name, kid? Emma, she answered softly. Emma. He repeated it like he was making a promise to remember. All right, Emma. You trust us enough to let us get you where you need to go. Emma hesitated. Everything in her upbringing told her not to trust strangers, especially ones who looked like they belonged in a gang. But then she remembered the look on Tyler's face when Raven towered over him. The sound of Maya's voice telling her she was stronger than her bullies. The way the bikers had formed that unshakable wall around her without hesitation. She nodded. I trust you. A ripple of approval passed through the crew. Maya grinned. Good girl. Raven tapped one of the men on the shoulder. Beer, rig up the sidecar. Emma tilted her head. Sidecar. Minutes later, Bear rolled a Harley forward with a sidecar attached. The chrome gleamed under the pier lights, the leather seat inside polished but clearly well used. He patted it proudly. Built this myself. She's sturdy. Emma stared. Yo, you want me to ride in that? Raven's mouth twitched with the ghost of a smile. Unless you feel like racing us in your chair. A laugh bubbled from Emma's throat before she could stop it. The first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. It felt strange but good, like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a room too long. With careful hands, Maya helped her transfer into the sidecar while Bear folded her wheelchair and strapped it securely to the back. Emma's heart thudded again, not from fear this time but from excitement. She had never been this close to a motorcycle before, never imagined herself riding in one. The engine roared to life beneath her, the vibration thrumming through the seat into her bones. The smell of oil and leather filled her nose, mixing with the salty sea breeze. For the first time in years she didn't feel trapped, she felt alive. Raven swung onto his own Harley and pulled up alongside her, giving her a quick nod. Ready, kid? Emma gripped the side of the seat, her eyes wide. Yeah, I think so. The crew revved their engines in unison, a sound so loud it rattled the pier boards. Heads turned again, phones lifted to capture the spectacle. And then, with Raven at the lead, the Steel Serpents rolled out of the pier and onto Ocean Avenue. A convoy of chrome and thunder escorting one girl whose life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. As the city lights blurred past and the wind whipped through her hair, Emma realized something she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was riding. The night air in Santa Monica carried a bite, crisp with ocean salt and city neon. Emma sat nestled in the sidecar as the convoy of bikers rumbled down Ocean Avenue, the engines echoing against storefronts and palm-lined boulevards. People stopped to stare, some in awe, some in unease. But Emma wasn't paying attention to them. She felt the wind whip against her cheeks, carrying strands of her hair loose from their clip. Every vibration of the engine beneath her was like a pulse, reminding her she was moving, really moving, in a way her own legs no longer allowed. For once, the chair strapped behind Bear's bike didn't feel like a cage. It was just luggage. The group rode in formation, Raven up front, Bear close by, Maya flanking the other side. The rest of the Steel Serpents fanned out in a loose diamond. Emma noticed the way traffic instinctively parted for them, how even cars seemed reluctant to cut them off. These weren't men and women people wanted to mess with. And yet, here they were, treating her like she was part of the pack. After several blocks, Raven raised a hand and the convoy slowed, pulling into a wide parking lot near the edge of Palisades Park. The bikes lined up neatly, headlights cutting across the grass, engines quieted, leaving only the distant hum of the city and the crash of waves against the shore. Bear came over and unstrapped Emma's wheelchair, unfolding it with surprising gentleness for a man who looked like he could lift a truck. Maya helped Emma transfer, then squatted down so they were eye level. How was it? Maya asked, her grin playful. Emma couldn't stop smiling. It was amazing. A Bear chuckled. Better than a bus ride, huh? Emma laughed, the sound catching her by surprise again. She didn't realize how long it had been since laughter came so easily. Raven stepped over, hands resting on his belt. In the glow of the streetlight his features looked more weathered, the scar down his cheek deeper, but his eyes softer. Glad you liked it, kid. But we didn't stop here for fun. We stopped here because I want to make sure you understand something. Emma tilted her head. Understand what? Raven crouched in front of her again, just as he had on the pier. His voice dropped low, steady. What happened back there, the way those boys treated you? That's not your burden to carry. That's theirs. Weak people look for someone to crush so they don't feel so small themselves. Emma swallowed, her fingers curling on her lap. But it still hurts. Of course it does, Raven said. You'd be less human if it didn't. But you don't let it define you. You don't let it chain you. For a moment his eyes shifted. Not to her but to some memory far behind them. His jaw clenched. Emma noticed the faint tremor in his hand as he rested it on his knee. Maya glanced at him, her voice gentle. Raven. He waved her off. Then after a beat of silence he spoke again. I had a brother. Younger, he was like you, Emma. Wheelchair after a bad accident. Doctor said he'd never walk again. And people, kids, grown men, didn't matter. They treated him like he was less. Like his life didn't count the same. One day. His voice cracked for the briefest moment. One day he couldn't carry that weight anymore. The words hung heavy in the night air. Emma's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say, but instinctively she reached out, resting her hand lightly on his wrist. I'm sorry, she whispered. Raven looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time his eyes weren't just sharp steel. They were human, fragile. That's why I don't stand by anymore, he said, voice firm again. Not when I see it happening. Not to someone like you. Not. Emma's throat burned with unspoken words. She wanted to tell him how many times she'd cried alone in her room after school, how many times she'd pretended she didn't hear the whispers, how many times she'd forced a smile so her mom wouldn't worry. but the words stuck. Instead, she just nodded. The other bikers stood quietly around them, the weight of Raven's story pulling them into silence. They weren't just a crew bound by engines and leather. They were bound by scars, some visible, some hidden. Finally, Maya broke the heaviness with a soft laugh. All right, before we drown in our own tears, who wants churros? I swear the stand down by the pier has the best in town. A ripple of chuckles moved through the crew, the tension easing. Bear grinned at Emma. You like churros, kid? Emma wiped at her eyes quickly and managed a small smile. I love them. Then it's settled. Raven said, standing tall again. Steel Serpents ride for churros. Engines roared back to life and soon they were rolling once more, the night stretching ahead. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The shadows of the past weren't just Raven's. They were hers too. And for the first time she wasn't carrying them alone. By the time the Steel Serpents rolled back toward the Santa Monica Pier, the boardwalk had shifted into its nighttime rhythm. String lights glowed above food stands, music poured from buskers strumming guitars, and the smell of fried dough and caramel corn drifted through the salty air. Tourists still clustered in groups, snapping photos against the Ferris wheel's bright spin. Emma, snug again in Bear's sidecar, felt like she was watching the world from a new vantage point. A few hours ago she had been another face in the crowd, sitting quietly, trying not to be noticed. Now people turned their heads as the Serpents thundered past. Curious, cautious, some even clapping as if a parade had just arrived. The bikes slowed and parked in the same wide lot by the pier where it had all started. Engines clicked as they cooled, the vibrations fading into the hum of the night. Emma's wheelchair was unstrapped and set up again, and as she transferred back into it, she realized she wasn't embarrassed. Normally she hated the process, how people stared, how long it took. But with Maya steadying her arm and Bear waiting patiently with the folded chair, she didn't feel weak. She felt included. All right, kid. Maya said, brushing crumbs from her gloves after polishing off a churro. This where we hand you back over to your mom. Emma nodded, glancing at the neon-lit diner a few blocks away. The shift must have been ending soon. Yeah, she'll be off in about 15 minutes. Raven leaned against his Harley, arms folded, watching the crowd mill by. We'll walk you over, not taking chances with those punks. Emma blinked. You think they'd come back? People like that hate being embarrassed, Raven replied. His tone wasn't sharp, just certain. They lick their wounds and then look for a way to get even. A bear cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading under his beard. And if they do, they'll regret it. The Serpents formed up loosely around Emma as she wheeled toward the diner. They weren't pushing or hovering, they just kept pace, an unspoken wall of leather and chrome. And sure enough, as they neared the corner, voices rose above the din of the crowd. Look who it is. Emma's stomach dropped. Tyler and Brent. They were leaning against the rail near a taffy stand, drinks in hand, their earlier humiliation still burning in their eyes. Only this time they weren't alone. 3 more boys stood with them, older, broader, with the same sneering confidence. One of them carried a skateboard slung over his shoulder like a weapon. Emma froze, the Serpents didn't. Raven stepped forward first, his boots striking hard against the pier planks. Maya flanked him, braid swinging. Bear and 2 others closed ranks behind Emma, cutting off any path toward her. Tyler smirked when he saw them. Oh look, the Cripple's bodyguards. Brent laughed, though his voice cracked with nerves. What? You need a whole biker gang to hold your hand now. The bigger boy with the skateboard leaned in, sizing Raven up. Old man, this ain't your business. The boardwalk stilled again, eyes turning toward the confrontation. Buskers stopped mid-song. Vendors froze mid-sale. The Ferris wheel kept spinning, but it felt like the entire pier held its breath. Raven didn't flinch. His voice was low, steady, the same tone that had made Tyler wilt before. She's my business now. The boy with the skateboard laughed, but it rang hollow. What are you gonna do about it? You lay one hand on us, cops will be here in 5 minutes. You think we need to touch you? Maya's voice cut sharp, laced with fire. She stepped closer, eyes locked on the boy. You already touched her. That's enough. The boys shifted uncomfortably. They'd expected fear, not defiance. Not a wall of bikers who seemed ready to take on the world. Tyler tried again, desperate to claw back dignity. She's nothing. Just a cripple slowing everybody down. Something inside Emma snapped. She had spent years swallowing words, hiding tears, forcing herself to ignore every cruel jab. But surrounded by the Serpents, with Raven's story still echoing in her head, she felt a surge of strength she didn't know she had. Her voice rang out, clear and sharp. I am not nothing. The boys froze, shocked that she'd spoken back. Emma's hands tightened on her wheels. You think I'm weak? Try living one day in this chair. Try waking up every morning knowing people like you will stare, whisper and push just to see me break. And guess what? I'm still here. I'm still smiling. That makes me stronger than you'll ever be. The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, even claps from strangers who had been watching quietly. Phones shot up, capturing every second. Tyler's face turned red, his mouth opening to spit another insult. But Raven took one step closer, and whatever words he had died in his throat. The boy with the skateboard lowered it slowly, eyes darting between the serpents and the crowd. He muttered something under his breath and nudged Tyler. Let's go, not worth it. One by one they slunk away, swallowed by the lights and noise of the boardwalk. The tension broke like a wave crashing on sand. The serpents relaxed, the crowd resumed its chatter, and Emma sat breathing hard, her chest tight with adrenaline. Raven crouched in front of her once more. His eyes softened, but his voice carried weight. That right there, kid. That was strength. Emma blinked back, tears, a shaky smile breaking across her face. For the first time she believed him. The bell above the diner door jingled as Emma wheeled inside, the steel serpents following close behind. The warm air carried the smell of coffee, bacon grease, and pie crust. It was late enough that the booths were nearly empty, save for a couple of truckers sipping black coffee and a young couple splitting a slice of cherry pie. Behind the counter, her mother Maria wiped down the chrome surface with a rag. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her apron streaked with flour and syrup. She looked tired, the kind of tired that never left. But when she saw Emma, her whole face lit up. Baby. Maria rushed around the counter, dropping the rag. She crouched in front of Emma, hands cupping her daughter's cheeks. I was getting worried. You said you'd wait on the pier. Why didn't you text? Emma opened her mouth, but words stuck. She didn't know how to explain. The weight of what had happened pressed down on her chest. Raven stepped forward. His towering frame seemed to fill the diner, but his voice was low, almost gentle. Mom, your girl ran into some trouble tonight. We made sure she got here safe. Maria's eyes darted from Raven to the wall of leather and tattoos behind him, her smile vanishing into suspicion. Trouble. Her voice sharpened. What kind of trouble? Emma swallowed hard. It was Tyler and Brent. From school. They pushed my chair. Her voice cracked, the memory flashing like a knife. They called me names. They wouldn't stop. Maria's hands shook against her cheeks. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice turned to steel. They hurt you? No, Mama. Emma said quickly. Not really, they just... She hesitated, then whispered. They scared me. Maria stood slowly, her gaze sliding to the serpents. Her eyes hardened. And what are you, some kind of gang? Why are you here with my daughter? The room went still. Bear shifted uncomfortably. Maya's lips pressed into a line. Raven didn't flinch. We're a motorcycle club. People call us outlaws because of the way we look, maybe because of things we've done. But tonight, all we did was step in when no one else would. Maria crossed her arms, defiant. And I'm supposed to believe you did this out of the kindness of your heart. Raven's jaw tightened. He looked at Emma, then back at Maria. No. Not kindness. Respect. She didn't deserve what happened to her out there. Nobody does. Emma's voice broke through, trembling but strong. Mama, they saved me. Maria turned back, startled. They didn't have to. Emma continued, her throat thick. But they did. When those boys tried to come back, I was so scared. And then, she wiped her eyes quickly. Then I spoke up. I told them I wasn't nothing. And people heard me. Because she glanced at the serpents. They made sure I wasn't alone. Maria's hand rose to her mouth, eyes brimming. For a long moment she just stared at her daughter, then at the bikers. Her gaze softened, but caution lingered in her tone. You stayed with her. All this time. Maya stepped forward. All the way. We don't walk away when someone needs us. The diner was quiet except for the faint hiss of the coffee pot. Finally, Maria exhaled and nodded. Then I owe you thanks. Bear smiled softly. Don't thank us, ma'am. Just take care of that girl. She's stronger than most grown men I know. Maria brushed a strand of hair from Emma's face, her hands steady now. When she looked at her daughter, there was no pity, only pride. For the first time in a long time, Emma saw it in her mother's eyes, belief. Raven inclined his head. We'll be on our way then. But Emma's hand shot out, wet. The serpents paused. Her voice was small, but it carried weight. Can I see you again? The question hung in the air, startling even herself. She didn't know why she asked it, maybe because for once she had felt brave, maybe because she didn't want the night or the feeling to end. Raven studied her for a long moment. Then he gave a single nod. Yeah, kid, you can. The night outside the diner was heavy with ocean mist. The glow from the pier lights shimmered across the wet pavement, and the muffled roar of waves carried up the street. The steel serpents walked Emma and Maria to the edge of the lot. Their boots crunched against gravel, their leather jackets creaked with each step. Emma's wheelchair squeaked as Maria guided her, but Emma kept sneaking glances at the bikers. They looked untouchable in the neon glow, men and women carved out of the night itself. Raven stopped near his bike and turned back toward her. His voice was calm, but it had the weight of a promise. You know, kid, what you did back there? Standing up to those boys, that takes guts. Most people twice your age would have just kept quiet. Emma shifted, embarrassed but smiling. I wasn't brave. Not really. I was shaking the whole time. Maya crouched down so her eyes were level with Emma's. That's the thing about courage. It doesn't mean you weren't scared. It means you spoke anyway. That's rare. Maria placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, listening quietly. Her gaze lingered on Maya, so young, yet fierce, and for the first time she didn't just see outlaws. She saw protectors. Bear, leaning against his bike, spoke up. Look, we ain't saints. We've all done things we don't brag about. But one thing we don't stand for is cowards picking on someone who can't fight back. That's why we stuck around. Emma's brows furrowed. But why me? You don't even know me? Raven's eyes met hers, steady as stone. Because it could have been anyone. And tonight, it was you. That makes you family. The word hit Emma like a spark. Family. She thought of her father, who'd walked out years ago. Of her mother carrying everything alone. Of school, where she was invisible until someone wanted a laugh. Family wasn't something she heard often, not directed at her. Maria's lips tightened. Family? She looked uncertain, protective. She has a family. She has me. No disrespect, ma'am, Raven said. But family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when the world kicks you down. Who's in your corner when it counts? The street hummed with silence. Then Emma spoke, her voice quiet but sure. I want that. Maria turned sharply. Emma didn't back down. Mama, I want to feel like I belong somewhere. Tonight with them I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Her voice trembled but didn't break. I don't want that feeling to disappear. Maria looked at her daughter for a long time. Emma's eyes were blazing with something new, something unshakable. Strength. Finally Maria sighed. I don't know what kind of people you are, she said to the serpents. But I know what I saw tonight. My daughter walked, or rolled, into this diner stronger than she's ever been. And for that I'll trust you. Raven inclined his head with respect. That's all we ask. Maya grinned and stood. You should come to one of our rides sometime, Emma. We hit the coast on Sundays. Wind in your face, engines all around, it's freedom. Emma laughed softly. I don't even have a bike. Bear chuckled. You don't need one. You ride with us. We'll strap your chair safe to the back of the van, and you sit up front like a queen. Her eyes widened. Really, Raven confirmed. No one gets left behind. The engines roared to life, the sound vibrating in Emma's chest. She felt the ground shake beneath her, the rhythm of thunder rolling down the street. Raven gave her one last look. Remember this, kid. You're not weak, you're not broken. You're one of us now. And we don't forget our own. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. She lifted her hand awkwardly like a salute. Maya smirked and raised 2 fingers back. Bear gave a solemn nod. One by one they revved their bikes and peeled out, their taillights disappearing into the fog. The street was quiet again. But Emma's world was not the same. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the girl people pitied or mocked. She felt like someone who mattered, someone who had brothers and sisters roaring at her back. Beside her, Maria knelt down, brushing Emma's cheek. You okay, baby? Yeah, Emma nodded. Yeah, mama, better than okay. Maria smiled faintly though her eyes glistened. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, then maybe tonight was a blessing. Sunday morning dawned golden over Santa Monica. The ocean glimmered like scattered coins under the sun, and the salty breeze carried a bite of freedom. For most people, the pier meant tourists' laughter and funnel cakes. For Emma, it meant the place where her life had nearly broken, and the place where it had begun to change. The Steel Serpents had promised her something more than a memory of fear. They had promised her a ride. Maria wasn't entirely convinced. She paced the tiny living room of their apartment while Emma sat by the window, her hands folded tight in her lap. You're sure about this? Maria asked for the 3rd time, worry lining her forehead. These people aren't exactly choir boys. Emma's lips twitched. Neither were the apostles. Maria blinked. Excuse me, Emma shrugged. I read it somewhere. Point is, good people don't always look the way you expect. Before Maria could reply, the sound hit. An avalanche of engines rolling down their street. The rumble was so loud it made the window glass tremble. Emma's heart leaped. She wheeled herself to the door, pulling it open before Maria could stop her. There they were. A dozen bikes, chrome flashing, black leather gleaming in the sunlight. Raven at the front, Maya beside him, Bear just behind. Neighbors peeked from curtains, some clutching coffee mugs, others shaking their heads. Raven killed his engine, pulled off his helmet and looked up at Emma. His grin was small but certain. Ready, kid? Emma's breath caught. More than ready. The serpents worked with surprising care. Bear and another biker, Flint, lifted Emma gently from her chair and settled her into the passenger seat of the club's black van, modified with harnesses and custom seats. Maya folded her chair and secured it in the back. Maria hovered nervously. If anything happens to her. Raven met her eyes, his voice steady. Nothing will, you have my word. For a moment, Maria held his gaze. Then she nodded, though her hands still fidgeted at her sides. The convoy rolled out, engines thundering in unison. Emma's chest buzzed with the vibrations, her ears filled with the roar. For the first time she wasn't watching from the sidelines. She was in it, part of it. They rode along the coast highway, the ocean stretching endlessly beside them, blue and wild. The wind whipped through the open windows, carrying the smell of salt and freedom. Raven led the pack, his black Harley slicing through the sunlit air. Maya threw a fist in the sky, her laughter trailing behind her like a song. Emma pressed her face to the glass, wide-eyed. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared as the sea of bikers rolled past, their jackets stitched with the serpent emblem. Some frowned. Others raised phones to snap pictures. But Emma wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about the rush in her veins, the sense of belonging that roared louder than the engines. For the first time in her life she didn't feel fragile, she felt unstoppable. Bear rode alongside the van, catching her eye. He lifted 2 fingers in a peace sign. Emma grinned and mimicked it, her laughter bubbling out. They stopped at a cliffside lookout where the ocean stretched vast and endless. The serpents parked their bikes in a row, the chrome gleaming in the sun. Raven opened the van and helped Emma out. She wheeled to the edge of the lookout, her hair whipping in the wind. "This," Maya said, standing beside her, "is why we ride. Not for the noise, not for the leather. For this, for freedom." Emma's eyes filled, though she wasn't sure if it was the wind or something deeper. "It feels like flying." Raven crossed his arms, his voice low. "Remember this feeling, kid. No one can take it from you. Not bullies, not fear, not even life in a chair. Freedom's in here." He tapped his chest. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She wanted to etch this moment into her soul forever. And then something unexpected happened. Other bikers began to arrive, not serpents, but riders from other clubs who had heard the story. They rumbled into the lot, parking alongside the serpents. Patches of different colors and names stitched on their backs. At first Emma thought there might be trouble. But Raven simply nodded, and one by one they walked up, tipped their helmets, and greeted Emma. A woman with streaks of silver in her hair handed her a small patch. It wasn't leather, just fabric, stitched with a single word: strength. "For you," she said. "Word gets around fast in our world. You've got more of this than most of us put together." Emma stared at the patch, her throat tight. "I don't even ride a bike." "You don't need one," the woman said. "You've already proved yourself." The crowd of bikers stood around her, a circle of thunder and leather, united not by rules but by respect. Emma realized then, this wasn't just a ride, it was a rite of passage. She wasn't just a girl in a chair anymore. She was one of them.